Hey everyone, welcome back. Brick City Brown Chick coming at you. And this is my long awaited return to musical topics. Music is one of my absolute favorite things in the world and one of my favorite things to talk about. Those of you who've been watching this podcast for a couple of months know we started with 3 videos about various aspects of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We talked about the 2025 nominees, the process for being nominated, and the 2025 inductees. So this will be my last video on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for 2025. But don't worry, we have other musical topics coming up in the next several weeks because, like I said, I love talking about music. I'm going to tell you right up front that I'm going to need to refer to my cheat sheet that's over here because there's going to be a lot of information in this video. And what we are talking about this week are artists and acts who have been overlooked by the Hall of Fame. So these are people who meet the eligibility requirements. Again, a short reminder about what those are. There are 3. It has to have been 25 years since their first album or single was released. They must be a star or a band that has provided musical influence, and they must be an artist or band that artists who've come after them refer to as their inspiration in whatever form that takes. Getting into music, how they play music, whatever, all those things. So those are the criteria. So today we are looking at artists and acts who are not in the Hall of Fame and who, by my impression, should be. So I narrowed it down to 12. And trust me, narrowing it down to 12 took quite a bit, hence the couple of week delay on this podcast. But I've got the list together now, and so I'll share with you my list. This is in alphabetical order. That's the order the list is. So it's not, the first person I talk about is at the bottom of my list and the last person is at the top. No, this is a alphabetical list. I thought that was the fairest way to do it. And I've shared over my podcast a year and a half doing this that I like, lots of different kinds of music, and I like certain things and certain things I don't like. But I think this list will be surprising to a lot of people, but it just expresses the breadth of my musical appreciation. So some of this music is not things I listen to, but they are artists and acts that I think deserve the honor and the respect, because even though I don't listen to their music, I know tons of people who do, and they have shared with me over the years why this artist or act is really great. And so I've taken that into account as well. So, okay, let's get started with our first act, the band America. America was huge in the 1970s. I was born in 1970, so my sort of introduction to what we would now call adult contemporary, or I've heard some people call it yacht rock, lots of slow sort of ballad music. America was phenomenal at that. America formed in the late 1960s, and they were known for such songs as Horse with No Name. That's a song that practically everybody knows. They also are known for Ventura Highway and Sister Golden Hair. That's another song that everybody knows. They were folksy. They were sort of stripped down and no nonsense, a lot of acoustic guitars, and they really did serve as an inspiration for so many acts that came after them. The truth is, America was a folk act, and there are not a lot of folk artists in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's a handful: George Harrison, early days of Elton John, the Grateful Dead, Eric Clapton, those sorts of folks, Joni Mitchell, Joan Baez. But that's kind of the list. So I really think America deserves to be there for all the inspiration that they provided to the bands that came after them. America has been eligible for the Hall of Fame since 1997. So they really are way overdue. So they're the first band that I think deserves to be there. The next band is a threefer. It's Anthrax, Megadeth, and Slayer. And when I said there's music on this list that I don't listen to, here would be the group. Am I cheating a little bit by putting these three bands together? Yeah, but I'll tell you in a minute why. There are four bands that are part of what's called the Big Four of metal. They are these three bands: Anthrax, Megadeth, Slayer, and Metallica. Of those four, Metallica is the only one that is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Of these bands, the one I am the most familiar with is Anthrax. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Anthrax really did make a stamp on rock music and were one of the first pioneers of the rock rap combination. Anthrax did a song with Ice-T's band, which is called Body Count. And it just really made people think about that type of music differently. Of course, the true pioneers come from the 80s. Run DMC and Aerosmith remade the Aerosmith song Walk This Way. And that was really, really the first time people went, oh, you can put these genres together and they can work. But Anthrax really did come back in the 90s and update that style and show people that it could still work. That is a style that was later popularized by Linkin Park. Linkin Park worked with Jay-Z on a Linkin Park song called In the End, which got turned into Encore, which is a really funky, great combination of Linkin Park's sound and Jay-Z's sound. So that is really what Anthrax is known for. Megadeth is known for its technically complex guitar solos and dark, angry lyrics. Now, some people ask why it is Megadeth is so angry. Megadeth is led by Dave Mustaine. And Dave Mustaine used to be in Metallica. And he was thrown out of Metallica for reasons I'm not really sure. There's his version, there's Metallica's version. It's like whenever people say there are three sides to every story: your story, my story, and the truth. Okay, the truth is probably somewhere in between. But he went off and founded his own band, and Megadeth became popular and famous in its own right. Do I think one of the reasons Megadeth has never been inducted is because people really can't stand Dave Mustaine? Yeah. I think in the early 2000s, 2004 or 2005, he became a born again Christian and sort of really took his politics to the far, far right. And that turned off a whole lot of people. But his politics, while it does have something to do with his music because he writes lyrics about his politics, that does not change the influence and the sound that Megadeth has and what they bring to the table. So that is a reason why they should be inducted into the hall. Now, the band I know the least about on this list is Slayer. I know they've been together since 1981, and that tons of bands who've come through in the last 10 to 15 years cite them as their inspiration. These include Lamb of God, Dark Throne, Mayhem, Behemoth, Testament, and Power Trip. Those are all bands who are working now who cite Slayer as their inspiration. Slayer is known for their aggressive style and their fast paced music. They have some very controversial songs. They have songs with titles like Rain in Blood, South of Heaven, and Seasons in the Abyss. So we're talking dark, serious music. But I've talked to people who are into Slayer, and they say if you want to get started in like thrash metal or deathcore metal, that Slayer is the band to start with, because a lot of the trends that we see today were started by Slayer. So that's the case for Slayer. So Anthrax, Megadeth, and Slayer, the last three of the big four, should also be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Up next is one of my all-time favorite bands, and the fact that they have never been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was shocking and dumbfounding. And that is the B-52s. The B-52s are referred to as the world's greatest party band. And it's not by them. This is a name that has been given to them by their stands and fans, but also by famous musicians who love the B-52s. The B-52s song that everybody knows is Love Shack. If you're a little older, the B-52 song that you know is Rock Lobster. Rock Lobster was kind of their out of the gate in the late 70s, out of the box. Oh my God, what in the world is this song? And as they got older and got more popular, their lyrics and their sound changed a bit, but they never lost their party vibe or their edginess or their willingness to just be different. The first time I saw the B-52s on television, my thought was, am I on some sort of unknown acid trip? I mean, I'm looking at these two women, the two ladies in the B-52s are Kate Pearson and Cindy Wilson, with these huge beehive hairdos and go-go boots. I'm looking at the lead singer, Fred Schneider, who's wearing this gold lame suit, complete with shirt and shoes. And this was the 90s, like the early 90s. I was still in college, and I was like, what in the world? But then I started listening to the B-52s and became a huge stan. They retired about 3 years ago now. They're all well into their 70s. And I was lucky enough to see them on their final tour. I'd seen them a couple of times before. And the B-52s are amazing. They have inspired so many acts that have come after them, not in terms of how they looked or how they dressed, but just how much fun they had making music. That became a huge reminder that music didn't always have to be so serious, that it really could be fun and interesting. And so that is why I believe the B-52s belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The next artist on my list is Phil Collins. Today, I think we remember Phil Collins as a novelty. I think we remember him as a goofy guy who made goofy songs like Sussudio. If you were a teenager when Susudio came out, you kind of laughed and rolled your eyes and thought, what the heck is this goofiness? But the truth is, Phil Collins was a man ahead of his time. Now, Genesis, the band he worked with for years, is in fact in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I am specifically talking about Phil Collins' solo career. While he's known for goofy songs like Susudio, he is also known for songs with incredible drum lines. And the one that comes to mind for most people first is I Don't Care Anymore. That song has one of the most amazing drum lines ever constructed and ever put on vinyl. And so that's super important. Phil Collins became a famous artist, soloist in his own right at a time when MTV had really taken off and that everybody thought you had to be a good looking English guy. You had to be David Bowie or the guys from Duran Duran or the guys from Spandau Ballet. And all of a sudden, here comes Phil Collins, 30 something, mostly bald at that point, but with banger after banger songs that you could not ignore. And you could not just say, oh, that's just some weird old guy trying to be cool and trying to be hip. Phil Collins never tried to be hip. He never tried to be someone he was not. He was always the middle-aged, balding guy who was going to do something funny or something goofy or play you a really slick drum line. He wasn't going to try to be a pretty boy. He wasn't going to try to wear a toupee or makeup. He was just going to be who he was. And who he was an incredibly influential artist who a lot of modern day drummers cite as one of their inspirations. So I believe very strongly that Phil Collins' body of work should earn him a space in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The next artist on my list is affectionately referred to as Mutha, Mutha. And what that means is like, bow down. Just everybody bow down because she is the queen. And I know a lot of Gaga fans and stans refer to Gaga as mother, but even if you ask Lady Gaga, she is a big fan of this artist, and she will tell you that no, she is true mother. And that is Grace Jones. Grace Jones, who recently turned 77 years old and is still phenomenal and a badass, was a model, an actress, and a singer in the 1970s, before that was even a thing. When people talk today about Beyonce being a triple threat or J-Lo being a triple threat like it's never been done before, I always chuckle because I know Grace Jones and her history. If you've never seen Grace Jones perform, please Google it. She is amazing, regardless of her age. I've seen her in her 30s and her 40s and her 50s and her 60s. And she is going to be performing in just a couple of weeks at World Pride here in DC with Janelle Monáe, one of, for all practical purposes, her offspring. When you look at Janelle Monáe, if you understand Grace Jones, you see the through line to Janelle Monáe. Same with Lady Gaga. If you know Lady Gaga, you see the through line from Grace Jones. She was truly the first female solo artist who basically said, I don't give a crap. I'm going to look how I look. I'm going to dress how I dress. I'm going to do what I do. And you all can either come along for the ride or not. I honestly don't care. And that has always been her personality and her aesthetic. She was a dark-skinned woman in the music industry at a time where that was not a thing. I mean, back in like the late 70s, early 80s, if you wanted to see a dark-skinned woman, you were probably looking at Diana Ross. And Diana Ross is not dark-skinned. That's the point. Grace Jones is from Jamaica. She is an ebony goddess, and there is no mistake. Some of her songs, her most famous song is Pull Up to the Bumper. That is a song that everybody knows, and to this day, if you play that song in a club, everybody's getting on the dance floor. Some of her other songs include Private Life, Love is the Drug, which is a remake of a Roxy Music song, and Slave to the Rhythm. That is also another Grace Jones song that everyone knows. Grace Jones is an icon. She's an icon to women like me. She is a gay icon and always has been and has always been proud of that. And she is just a woman who paved the way for so many women that we love in the music industry today. So props and bow down to Mother. Grace Jones belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Another one of my all-time favorite bands is this band from Australia who has been eligible for the Hall since 1999, and that is In Excess. If you know anything about Australian music, you know that two bands and one artist are most famous for coming out of Australia. Olivia Newton-John, the Bee Gees, and In Excess. And those are three very different sounds, but you know that these are all acts from Australia. In Excess, the very first In Excess song I ever heard was Original Sin, which was their first single. And there is a line in that song that goes, "Dream on, black boy, dream on, white girl, and wake up to a brand new day. Dream on, black girl, dream on, white boy, and wake up to a brand new day." And as a 11, 12-year-old, when that song came out, I was like, whoa, what? What are we saying? These people are from Australia? So that's what first got me looking into In Excess. They, of course, had tons of songs after that. Never Tear Us Apart, Kick, The Devil Inside. There are tons of In Excess songs. They were a hugely influential band that I think in recent years have not gotten the respect they deserve. People my age remember that the lead singer of In Excess, Michael Hutchence, committed suicide at age 37. And so the band carried on for a few years afterwards. They had various guest singers and artists, and then they did a Making the Band where they picked a new singer, but they have since now retired from music. And so I think the next generation has not gotten the chance to see and hear how great In Excess was. Michael Hutchence had a Freddie Mercury from Queen level of charisma and stamina and just strut and attitude. And if you've ever seen Mick Jagger on stage, it's that kind of charisma. So if you're not familiar with In Excess, I encourage you to Google them and look at their body of work. And I do believe they belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame beside their countrymen, the Bee Gees. Okay, continuing on. When I found out from my friends who are into hard rock that this band was not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I was totally bewildered because it makes zero sense. and that band is Iron Maiden. What makes no sense here is that Iron Maiden, along with Judas Priest and Black Sabbath, are kind of the genesis of hard rock music. Iron Maiden has been around for more than 50 years. Judas Priest was just inducted back in 2022, 3 years ago. Black Sabbath was inducted back in, I think it was 2006 or 2007. So both of their counterparts have been inducted, but they have not. And given the hard rock bands who were influenced by them, who came after them, who have been inducted, bands like Guns N' Roses and Bon Jovi and Aerosmith and Foo Fighters, it is absolutely stupefying to me. And again, this is not a genre of music I listen to, but you pay homage to the originals, to the classic, to the first to do it, before you pay homage to the people who come after them. And this is one of the places where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame gets itself into trouble when you talk about things like credibility. How is Iron Maiden, the godfathers of hard rock music, not in the Hall of Fame? How is that possible? They have been eligible since 2005. So they could have gone in the same year Black Sabbath went in, or they could have gone in the year Judas Priest went in, or any of those years in between, but they have not. And this is a place where I would implore the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to induct Iron Maiden while the majority of the band is still with us. This is another issue with the Hall. They have a tendency to recognize people after the person dies. One of the incidents where they did that really annoyed me was Donna Summer. They had ample opportunity to induct Donna Summer before her death, and they did not. And the year after she died is when they decided to induct her. So it's not like this is new for the Rock Hall. They have a bad habit of doing this, but hopefully this will reach the ears of somebody in influence and they will recognize their oversight and make the third time the charm for Iron Maiden. They have been nominated twice before, but were not inducted, so I hope this is the time. The next person on my list may be a foreign name to maybe anybody under 40, but those of us who lived through the 70s will know the name Sylvester. Before Madonna, and during the time that Cher was coming up in her own career, Sylvester was the one name wonder of the 1970s. He brought so many unique aspects and talents to his music. He was an openly gay Black man who sometimes dressed feminine and sometimes dressed masculine, but almost always wore makeup. People remember the disco era as a time of, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. People were doing coke, music people were just out of their minds, and everybody was super open and accepting. Some of that is true, except for the open and accepting part. People were very accepting of you doing drugs and hanging out and doing stuff like that. But being accepting of a man who was openly gay and a Black man who was openly gay, absolutely not. But Sylvester was truly fearless. He went on American Bandstand in like his tight shirt and flowy pants and big curly wig and makeup and shiny lip gloss. And I remember watching Dick Clark stand there and interview him, and how proud and carefree and authentic this Black man was. And I was just blown away and amazed, even as a 8, 9-year-old child. Some of Sylvester's songs include Dance Dance, Disco Heat, You Are My Friend, Body Strong, and Living for the City. But the one Sylvester song that everyone, and I mean everyone, even if you don't think you know it, knows is You Make Me Feel Mighty Real. His staccato and soprano voice in that song is just truly amazing. He was a pioneer. He was a man way ahead of his time. And he was a man taken from us far too young. He was 42. And I believe after all these years, if you look at great, and I mean great, great singers in the R&B sphere and the pop sphere who've come out since Sylvester, many of them will cite him as an influence because, like me, they grew up listening to his records and seeing him and seeing what they could be. He has been eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame since 2003, so I really hope the Rock Hall will take a look and induct Sylvester. And now, the last person on my list is truly one of the all-time greats, is Luther Vandross. There was no one before and has been no one since with the voice and the charisma and the lyrics of Luther Vandross. Many people know that Luther Vandross started out like singing and writing jingles. He did that to make a living before he became a singer. And he was in a studio in New York singing backup for, I don't remember the singer, but someone else. But there was a famous artist in that studio that day who heard him sing. And after his session was over, immediately went to him and said, listen, this is who I am. I have this song. I think your voice as a background is exactly what I've been looking for. And that began the friendship of Luther Vandross with a rock icon named David Bowie. So if you listen to the song Young Americans, when you hear that young American, I was a young American, that is Luther Vandross's voice. And when I heard that story several years ago, I had to go back and really listen to it. And I was like, okay, I hear it now. So Luther Vandross, by the time he became, what we would think of as Luther Vandross, he was a man well into his 30s. And by that time, of course, he'd written tons of songs. And so he had a lot to say. And so one of the first true Luther classics I remember hearing is A House Is Not a Home. And that song, every time I listen to it now, still gives me chills because his voice just sort of rises and falls and he does sort of a scale thing. And it is just phenomenal. There are very few, like with folk singers, there are very few Black male solo artists in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There is, of course, James Brown, the godfather of soul. There is Chubby Checker, sort of the godfather of rock and roll guitar and that sort of thing. There is Ray Charles. There is Sam Cooke. And the most recent addition, who went in the 2025 class, is Chubby Checker. But it's a very short list. And it is a list I strongly believe Luther Vandross belongs on. Since his death in 2005 is when Luther Vandross died. He died in the after effects of a stroke at only 54. He has been frequently imitated, but absolutely never duplicated. There will never be another Luther Vandross. He has such great songs, so amazing. A House Is Not a Home, like I mentioned. There's Nothing Better Than Love, which is a great duet with the late Gregory Hines. There are so many Luther songs that if you dig into his catalog, you're just amazed at how proficient he was and also how much he could change his voice and make himself sound completely different. Luther has been eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, ironically, since 2005, since the year he died. And this is an oversight I hope the Rock Hall will correct very, very soon. So that is my list, everyone. This video was a bit longer than they usually are, but I wanted to do all 12 artists in one video. I thought about splitting it up, but I thought that was kind of cheap and tacky, so I put them all in this video. I hope everybody enjoyed this. If you have thoughts, please put them in the comments. If you believe particularly strongly that one of these artists doesn't belong, email me, send me a message and let me know, or put it in the comments. Or if there are other artists that you think belong in the hall, please put that in the comments as well. Please subscribe to this podcast if you have not. There's a little subscribe button somewhere underneath me. You can subscribe. You can hit the notifications button so that you know when I drop new videos. I drop videos usually once a week, but occasionally, if there's other pertinent things to talk about, it'll be twice a week. So please come back and join me again next week for a brand new topic. Hope you enjoyed the show. Everybody take care. Bye-bye.